first today. So, guys, I would like to introduce you our speaker for today. Uh, he is the senior lead researcher in Barna Group. We was exchanging some emails for a while, and he is a really good guy. I'm really impressive about how he is engaged in helping the church and the world to be aware about the changes of the youth culture, and how can we be more effective connecting the young people with Jesus. So I would like to introduce you Daniel Copeland. Daniel, feel free to talk with us. Yeah, Daniel will have the presentation now, and we will set the time for question by the end. So what how it will work? If you have a question, please write your questions on the chat. Okay, you can write your question in English, Portuguese, or Spanish. Only these three language, please. No other language, English, Portuguese, and Spanish. Please write your question in the chat, and in the moment I will present the question for him. Okay? Yeah. Daniel, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Fernando. Hi, everybody. As Fernando said, my name is Daniel Copeland, and I'm the senior lead researcher for Barna Group. It is an incredible honor and pleasure to be with you all. Really nothing excites me more than being on such a big global call like this. I'm from the United States of America. I live in the state of Georgia, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the United States. I've been with Barna Group for about 6 years now and have the incredible pleasure of leading our research efforts. And I'm just thrilled to be with you all today. So today, what we're going to be talking about is next generations. And we're going to be talking about how do we embrace the next generations. And leading in a global context like we are all living in is difficult. And what I hope we do today is come together over some objective data that helps us see the next generations, helps us see what are they experiencing, how do they see the world, what do they need, and then how can we come alongside them. It's really a pleasure to do this, and we're gonna make sure that you have all of this information. We can share this presentation with you afterwards, and I'm just really excited to be engaging with you. So today's presentation is called Embracing Gen Z. I recognize that the term Gen Z is not necessarily a globally used term. In some parts of the world, you'll hear Gen Z. In some parts of the world, they're actually referred to as Gen Alpha. I'll talk a little bit about what Gen Z means from our research context in a minute. But today, we're all thinking about how do we embrace them? How do we see them? How do we acknowledge them? I don't want to assume everybody here knows what Barna Group is. Barna Group is a 40-year-old research firm whose job, as we see it, is to understand the times and know what to do. This is the mandate given to the tribe of Issachar in First Chronicles, where the men of Issachar are told to go count all of the people and understand what they need. How much food do they need? How much clothing do they need? Do they need tents? Do they need rope? They're told, you are the tribe that will go understand the times and help leaders know what to do. And so for Barna Group, what we see our role globally is to help church leaders understand what's going on in the world and have perspective on what to do. So in that way, we are really trying to humbly bring data, bring perspective to leaders such as yourselves to help us do that, see the world, know what to do, know how to lead. We are mostly based out of the United States. We're mostly known for US research, but in the last few years, we've had some really incredible initiatives where we've gotten to do global research. In 2019, we released a book called The Connected Generation. The Connected Generation was one of the first efforts I actually got to lead here at Barna Group, and it was a global study of 25 countries where we wanted to understand 18 to 35-year-olds, and we wanted to understand how do they fit into the big picture of the global picture of the world, specifically when it comes to religion? We've heard all around the globe that people are dropping out of religion, that religion in the church is in decline. And we wanted to understand how true is that around the globe, and how much of that is a global story and how much of that is a local story. And what we found in this study was that experiences around the world were very, very common, that basically young people around the world looked very similar to one another, and that this is the result of globalized technology and communication. Just think about the fact that we are on Zoom together right now, doing something that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, we could not have done. We couldn't have connected this way. And in the same way, young people today are able to connect with each other, share thoughts, share ideas that they couldn't have shared several generations ago. And that means that we're all experiencing the world in very similar ways, unprecedented ways. We then got to follow that study up in 2022 with the open generation. Whereas the connected generation, the first study was about 18 to 35-year-olds, young adults. This study was all about teenagers. We were talking to 13 to 17-year-olds in 26 countries, and we were trying to understand what was their disposition, what was their posture towards Jesus, towards the Bible, and towards justice. How do they see the person of Jesus in their life? Who do they think Jesus is? What does the person of Jesus compel them to do? What is scripture to them? How do they think about scripture? Do they think it's just a book, or do they think it's a holy book inspired by God that ordains them to do and act certain ways in the world? And then finally, it's
Daniel,
no surprise. Yes.
Daniel, just we are translating you for Spanish and then into Portuguese. If you could speak a little bit slower, it
Lower.
would help us. Yeah, slower, just a
Absolutely.
little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Uh, so the open generation was this attempt to really understand the multiple ways that young people today embrace some of the key dispositions of the world: Jesus, scripture, and justice. On the side of justice, this is one of those things that around the globe, people approach very differently. It means different things all around the globe. But what we've recognized as research firms, as church leaders, is that next generations look at the world and they get uncomfortable with the status of the world. They don't necessarily like how people are treated. There's marginalization, there's injustices, there's climate change, there's all these different things that they look at and they say, I don't necessarily know if I'm comfortable with the direction the world's going, and I'd love to make a difference. So the open generation was all about teenagers. And today we're going to look at data from both of these studies to really understand next generations. And just to give us one more look at how to think about these are the American terms we use: millennials, Gen Z, not always globally used, but just to give you a framework of who we're talking about. Millennials today, they're 26 to 40 years old. They grew up in the technological boom. I'm a young millennial. When we were raised, I was raised before the smartphone, but I remember the smartphone and I remember the change that the world went through when we suddenly could talk to each other all around the globe. Life stage today, currently most millennials around the world are still in the first half of their working life. Maybe they're in their second or third job right now. They're currently starting families. One things that we've seen all around the globe is that millennials have waited a lot longer to start families than generations before them, and this is largely due to economics. They have a high dropout rate when it comes to religion. They're much less likely to have maintained the religion that they were raised in, but they still are spiritually open. Sometimes the phrase here in the States that you hear is they are spiritual but not religious. They like the disciplines of spirituality, the practices of it, but they don't necessarily like religion. They don't necessarily like going to church. Gen Z, on the other hand, currently they are 9 to 25 years old. To technology, they're native to technology. They've never known a world that was not globally connected, digitally connected. They've never not known social media. They're still mostly in their education years, primary and secondary education. The oldest of them are either just entering secondary education or just exiting it. Most of them are still in family or home-based religion, the religion that they were brought up in, but they remain very spiritually open. We do see that as they exit the home, they tend to exit religion. but they're still mostly in this very spiritually open and malleable place in their life. So there's three major themes we're going to talk about today, because we have three opportunities as leaders and people meeting with the next generation. First, we're going to talk about how do we embrace openness. Second, we're going to talk about how we offer belonging. And third, we're going to talk about how we nurture purpose. And what our data from around the globe has really shared is that these are three ways that you really need to understand the next generation. You have to understand that they're an open generation when it comes to religion and spirituality. That we have to be able to offer them belonging. They're a lonely generation. They're an isolated generation. And finally, we have to learn how to nurture their purpose, to see them where they're at and to help them in their journey. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's start with embracing openness. When we did the open generation study and we titled it The Open Generation, the first question we got was, what does open mean? What does it mean to be open? What do you associate with that? And I actually want to just give you a moment to reflect on your own. What does it mean to be open? And how is that different than being closed? Just reflect for a second. What does that mean to you? Maybe what does it mean in your spiritual or your religious life? What does that mean to be open? How would you think about that for yourself? I'm going to give you just a minute to think about that. So I pulled up the definition of open, and this is what the dictionary told me. To be open is having no enclosed or confined barriers. It's accessible on nearly all sides, and it's not restricted. That's what open means. And this might seem very simple to you, but let's complicate this a little bit when it comes to religion and when it comes to spirituality and how people see Jesus or they see the church. What we can think about is this different theological difference between a closed religion and an open religion. So the way a lot of church leaders and religious leaders around the globe have been taught to think about religion as there's an in group and an out group. You're either Christian or not Christian. You either go to church and have dedicated your life to Jesus, or you haven't. There's just two groups, in, out, bounded. There's a bounded group. Next generations actually operate without that line. They're very open. There is no in and out. It's much more of a spectrum. They kind of put Christ and Jesus at the center, and they are all on a spectrum, closer and further. But that means that some of them are going to be in different directions. Some of them are going to be operating and believing things that don't necessarily line up with the doctrine that we've all been taught. Which is complicated. It means that we have to see the world in less of a black and a white, less of a one way or another way, and much more as a spectrum, because this is how they're approaching the world. So to say very directly when it comes to their religious beliefs, Gen Z specifically, next generations, are less likely than their elders to be religiously affiliated, but reports of their demise of faith, that they're all dropping out of faith, is probably too extensive and probably too sweeping. At the moment, all around the globe, next generations exhibit remarkable openness, including towards Christ, and a desire to grow spiritually. They might have a different disposition, but they're still very spiritual. I want to share with you some data now to look at what does that mean? How could we quantify this? So all around the globe, this is how the global picture of Christianity kind of looks at the moment. If you were to just line up the different generations, and these are the words that we use in the States, you might use different words, especially the boomer generation. Baby boom generation is a US generation. But if you were to line up all the different generations in the world right now, what you would see is this general decline of how many of them are identifying as Christian. It's not an incredible difference, but it's stark. 67% of people over the age of 70 identify as Christian, compared to only 59% of the youngest. And what you really see is this no faith group, which I'll explain in a second, has increased all around the globe. That no faith group is basically people who say, I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic, or I just don't fit into a religious box. I don't necessarily think I don't have any idea about religion. And so that's the big change, that most of them are just opting out. Down here, what you see is that as Gen Z, specifically the youngest people in the world right now, as they enter, when they go from their teenage years to their adult years, the likelihood of them dropping out of Christianity increases. So 63% of Gen Z under the age of 18 and younger say that they are a Christian, compared to only 56% of those 18 plus years old. And you see this large increase of being no faith. So that means that the dropout rate in college age years, or 18 to 22, is still very high with next generations. That's the point that people tend to drop out of religion, which shouldn't scare us. It should just remind us that it happens. It's what a lot of people go through. It's what people have gone through for a long time over the course of history. What we all experience as people working in and around the church, in and around young people, is that they can feel very closed off to religion. So around the world, we asked people about how they feel about the church, how they feel about religion in general. And they tend to tell us things like, I have a hard time trusting religious institutions. I'm skeptical of most teachings I hear at church. I feel like the church can't answer my questions. And I feel like the church does not answer my questions. They feel very, very distant from the church. They don't necessarily trust it. And I recognize that not everybody here works in a church setting, but this is likely the same dispositions, the same beliefs they're coming to us with, where they feel like they have a hard time trusting. They feel like they can be skeptical of religious teachings. Sometimes it even feels like this. I feel like I have heard everything that church leaders have to teach. This is half of this generation all around the globe think they've learned it all already, which should be concerning to us, because by the time that they're 20 or 30 years old, they probably haven't learned it all, but they feel like they have. They feel very closed to the church, not open to the church. At the same time, what we often see as well is that they can sometimes feel too spiritually open, more spiritually open than we're ready to or equipped to handle. So what this looks like is all around the globe, young people are more likely to say many religions can lead to eternal life. There's no such thing as one true religion. Or they say things like, no one faith system works for me. So that openness we've talked about doesn't just resonate or center on Christianity. It usually means that they see all religions and say, none of these really work. I like some parts of this one, some parts of that one. And a lot of young people kind of make this hodgepodge, or they put them all together to figure out what they believe. And that can be really hard for us as church leaders who believe in the way, the truth, and the life, that to see the young people say, well, I want to cherry pick. I want to pick a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one and put it together for what works for me. So to summarize, young people can feel very close to the church and so spiritually open that it's hard to meet them where they're at. When we talk to young people about, well, why do you doubt spiritual beliefs? What makes religion hard for you? They tell us things like human suffering makes it really hard for me to believe in Christianity. So the question we asked young people right here was, do any of the following cause you to doubt Christian beliefs? What makes you doubt? All of Gen Z, they say human suffering. They say, I see the suffering happening around the world, and it makes me doubt that there is a true and good God. I see the hypocrisy of religious people. I see religious people teaching one thing, but doing another. I see science conflicting with the ways that we understand the world, the way that we understand how the world operates. There's conflict in the world. I have unanswered questions about the world. They see these things and they say, that's what makes me doubt. Christians in these next generations have very similar answers. It's not that these are just the people outside of the church looking in, it's that Christians themselves say, human suffering, the fact that there is poverty in the world, the fact that there is war in the world, that there is oppression in the world makes me doubt in a good God. I have unanswered questions. There's conflict. When we look at those who are outside of the church, it's these same things. The hypocrisy of religious people, science, human suffering, no faith. Young people say one religion can't have all of the answers. They don't believe in just one way of thinking. So we have to meet them then in this posture of openness where we see, okay, you're very open to what we believe, and we need to embrace, not that we're going to give up on what we believe, but we need to have an open opinion of what they're open about. Because the fact is, the data reveal, though, that Christian or not, Gen Z all around the globe are highly, highly spiritual, and they're curious about spirituality. They want to know more. Half of them, 50% of them, are certain there is a supernatural aspect to life. They believe in spiritual forces. They believe in powers of good and evil. And another 34% believe that this might be true. That means that nearly 9 out of 10 young people around the world believe in a divine force in the world. They might just not be sure what it is or how to approach it. 75% actually say all around the world that they believe in the one God. They're just a little unsure of where to put that. So, like I said, they can be very skeptical and untrusting of the church, but they're very, very open to God. They're very, very open to Jesus. They just need help putting the pieces together. So maybe we can think about, okay, how do we do that? Well, one way we can do it is just by thinking about what are they looking for in their spirituality. So we asked them all around the globe, when you consider your spiritual beliefs, what would you say you're looking for? What in life, maybe you can think for yourself, what in life are you looking for when you think about your spirituality, when you think about your faith? Well, young people today say they're looking for hope. They're looking for healing. They want to grow. They want inner peace. They want purpose, truth, guidance, meaning, really noble efforts, things that we can come alongside them and say, Christianity, the way, the truth, and the life offer these things. We can recognize that maybe the church, maybe religion, maybe Christianity has these things to offer, and they're looking for those things. And the way we can come alongside them is recognizing that we're looking for the same thing here. We might use different words, but all in all, we are on the same page. Maybe we can think about, how do they approach Jesus? So Gen Z is familiar with the person of Jesus, but also has wide-ranging views as to who he is. So we asked them, which of the following best describes your understanding of who Jesus Christ is? Was he God in human form, a prophet, just a normal human being? Was he a mythical or fictional character, just the character out of a book? Something else, or are you not sure? And what we see is that all around the globe, Gen Z teenagers and young adults, actually the majority, about 1 out of 3 of them say, I believe he was God in human form. Another third actually say that he was a prophet of God. Maybe they're confused about, was he Christ, the Son of God, or was he just another prophet, which we know is the belief of some other Abrahamic religions. But the fact is, like, that young people today, they know who Jesus is. Jesus is not foreign to them. They just have confusion about, is he God? Is he the Son of God? Or is he something else? But they're very aware. In the United States, we hear all the time, church and religious leaders feel as though young people today have never heard the message of Jesus. And what we find in the data is that that's not true. They know who Jesus is. Their problem is that they often don't see the person of Jesus reflected in the people of the church. And that makes them confused about if that can be really true of Jesus then. When we even ask them, do you want to learn more about Jesus? Gen Z all around the globe say yes. Almost 75% of them plus, so more than 3 out of 4 of them say, I'm very motivated to keep learning about this Jesus person. And that includes 1 out of 3 who say they have no religious faith. Those who are outside of the church, they're interested in the person of Jesus. They're interested in the values that Jesus embodied. They're interested in the lessons of Jesus. Their hesitations are usually regarding the church, that they don't know if the church is the right place for their spirituality. They might not know if your ministry is the right place for their spirituality. What we find overwhelmingly all around the globe is that young people love Jesus. They love his compassionate message. They're looking for people to help them in that walk. And so I want to conclude one more stat with this openness section, which is we asked young people in 25 countries, between the following, which is more important to you? Would you rather to be certain about your religious beliefs, or would you rather be open to where your faith leads you? Which is complicated. That's a really complicated idea. And what we find is that 62% of them, so 2 out of 3 young people say, I want to be open about my faith. I don't want to be locked into one faith system, one set of beliefs. I need openness, which can be challenging for us as religious leaders and Christian leaders, because a lot of times we feel as though we need to have answers. We need to have definitives. We need to be able to offer them one answer, but actually a posture of openness, a posture of relationship is what they're often looking for. A place where they can discuss, a place where they can really engage critical ideas and learn more deeply about what they believe in an open manner, rather than being told there's only one way to believe, there's only one way. So I want to conclude this section by saying we have a challenge in front of us all around the world. Considering all of their curiosity and questions about faith, as well as admiring Jesus, can we be open to an open generation? Can we let down our guard a little bit and say, we don't have to have all the answers. We just need to be open to them, open to what they're thinking, open to their needs, open to their curiosity, and make safe and wonderful places for them to express themselves. We can find them right where they're at. And that's going to lead us into section 2. We have an opportunity to offer them belonging. Belonging is a really complicated idea. And I'll give you just a second to think about, maybe in your life, what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to belong? And what's the difference, especially when you're working with teenagers or young adults, what's the difference between fitting in and belonging? Think about that for just a second. What's the difference between fitting in and belonging? My guess is that a lot of you who have spent a lot of time with young people have thought about this before and have great answers to this. There's a researcher here in the United States that has become very famous for her work on belonging. Her name is Dr. Brene Brown, and she offers this really, really helpful definition. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming what you need to fit in. It's about changing who you are. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change. Belonging is being your authentic self and knowing that no matter what happens, you belong. Young people all around the world feel like to be a part of a church, they have to give up who they are. They have to give up what they think. They have to fit in. They experience this in their schools. They experience this in their friend groups, that they have to change, that maybe there's something wrong about themselves. but what they're seeking is a place that they can belong. They want to understand their authentic self. They want to know that no matter where they are loved, that they are accepted. And that's challenging. It's challenging to create safe and brave places for them to do that. What we find in the data is that Gen Z's experience of connection is a paradox. They are communally oriented and they place high value on their close circle of friends, yet they are overwhelmed with loneliness, isolation, anxiety, and they lack feeling supported. There has never been a generation in world history that is more connected to people than this generation. They can pick up their phones, they can use social media to connect with anybody, and yet they are more lonely than anybody in world history. They feel isolated. It's a paradox. And for us as leaders, we have to acknowledge that paradox and recognize a need in the middle of it all. Let's talk about loneliness. Some people have said that loneliness is the greatest epidemic the world has ever faced. It is actually killing people all around the globe. What we see is when we talk to young adults and ask them, do you feel lonely? You can see this ebb and flow where in every single country we've studied, at least 1 out of 6, if not 1 out of 3 young people say, I frequently feel lonely. I frequently feel alone. I frequently feel isolated. And we need to sit with that as leaders and say, wow, that's really hard. That's really sad. In fact, the emotional climate of this next generation is very, very complicated. So this is US data specifically, but it gives us a good, there's a lot to read here and I have to turn your head a little bit. The emotional climate of the next generation is complicated. When asked, how often do you feel each of these? What we see is that of all young people today, 41% say, I feel deeply cared for by those around me. 40% say, someone believes in me. 33% say, I feel secure in who I am. But if we were to come down here to the far right, we also see 28% say, I feel afraid to fail. 28% say, I feel a need to be perfect all of the time. I'm uncertain about the future. And that 1 out of 5 who say, I feel lonely and isolated from other people. Think about the young people you might work with and recognize that at least 1 out of 5 of them might be experiencing a high amount of loneliness, lack of connection. They're also all around the globe overwhelmed by technology. So we ask young people, when you're using social media, what do you feel? And you see the same paradox of good and bad, positive and negative. A huge majority of them say social media makes me feel connected to the world, connected to other people, informed, accepted. But look at the bottom here. At the same time, it's making them feel connected to others and connected to the world. It also makes them feel insecure. It also makes them feel isolated, harassed, or even bullied. We're connected to these devices, to social media, and we do it because we feel like it's normal. We like the positives of it, but we also can't escape the negatives of it, that it connects us and it disconnects us. It builds us up and it tears us down. And this is the reality that our young people today, and maybe all young people into the future, are going to be filled with this overwhelming unsuredness of, am I loved or am I not? Technology makes me feel connected and disconnected, lonely, and like I have friends. And we have to see that. So how do we respond? We think at Barna, the best way to respond would be with an emotionally connected global church. So we ask young people, if you had an emotional need, how likely would you to be to reach out to a pastor for support? I recognize we're not all pastors here. We work in different kinds of ministries, but I think you could replace this word pastor with a crew leader or with a young life leader or somebody who in your life is a spiritual leader to you. And what we see is that young people who are attached to the church, church goers, are incredibly likely to say, I would love to reach out to a church leader, a religious leader, if I needed help. That's what they're looking for. They want somebody who sees their loneliness, who sees their needs, and would engage with them, would help them in their journey. They're very, very likely. This is what they're looking for, somebody who sees their loneliness. Gen Z is also looking for people who will support them in their journey. So this is one of my favorite data points we've come out with in the last few years. We asked young people to agree or disagree with this statement or say how true is this statement of them. I long for a community where I can speak openly about my spiritual beliefs. You see that theme of openness again. I long for a place where I can be open. I long for a place where I can belong. And what you see is that it's a huge amount of Gen Z teens and adults who have this longing. They have this longing to belong, and they want to speak openly. And so this is why spiritual openness and belonging have to be considered at the same time, equal-handedly, because they're open and they're looking for a place to belong all around the globe. And what we find in the data is that the more a person all around the globe connects with Christianity, the less likely they are to feel lonely. So if you look at the global picture of data and you took that first data point I looked at where we showed all around the globe how many people feel lonely, and you separated it by how close or how far are they from a religious community, you see that those the closest to religion, specifically Christianity here, are less likely to feel lonely. This is the community that the church can offer them. So 16% of practicing Christians of the next generation, so a practicing Christian being someone who is deeply engaged in their church community, only 1 out of 6 of them feel lonely compared to 1 out of 3 people outside of the church. And I think this should be encouraging to us as leaders to see when we bring them in, when we offer them openness and belonging, they feel less lonely. We make a positive impact. We help them where they need it. And that should be a good sign of hope for all of us. So as next generations come of age, we all have a chance to help them have a more consistent whole life experience of belonging, and perhaps to be among the most meaningful relationships they rely on. Resilience in our faith is rooted in relationships. We can't know that we belong if nobody's on our side and if nobody's looking out for us. And so as church leaders, as religious leaders, we have to be able to look at them and say, you belong here no matter what you believe right now, whether it's going to be a short journey to Christ or a long journey to Christ, you belong right here. We will care for you. We will be your people no matter what. It's kind of like what Ruth says in the Old Testament, your people will be my people. You belong here no matter what. Let's move to our final section. So we talked about first, we can embrace their openness. Second, we can offer them belonging. And finally, we have to nurture their purpose. When they're here with us and we're offering them belonging, and when we're open to them, what do we have the opportunity to do? Well, we can nurture their purpose. So I want to give us a self-reflection. What is purpose? How do you nurture a young person's purpose? Maybe your own purpose. How do you know that you're growing? It's actually a very hard to answer question, I think, at least. If I was to take this on, it would take me a long time of sitting, meditating, praying to figure out, what do I think my purpose is? And do I believe that my spiritual community, my church community, my religious community is helping me in that journey? So let's do a quick exercise of how should we think about purpose? What is it? So there's how God built me. That's my interests. It's my passions. It's my strengths, my spiritual gifts, the mission that I feel like I'm on. It can even be my hobbies. That's how God built me. In Ephesians, Paul talks about God being the master craftsman. He builds us up to be who we're supposed to be. There's then what the world needs. The world needs service. It has community needs. There are injustices in our world. There's your job. We need jobs. We need people working to make this world a better place. And we need people working to make sure that our world continues to operate, that we have enough people to support the world that we've built. When we push these two things together, we get our purpose. How God built me overlapping with what the world needs. I think it can be that simple for the purposes of what we're going to look at today, but every single person has that, how God built them, what the world needs. And as church leaders, we can help people find that overlap. We can help a young person say, wow, you're really, really talented in this way. The world needs more people doing that. What we find in next generations is that they deeply desire the opportunity to contribute. So Christians who are 13 to 17-year-old, over 70% of them, so more than 7 out of 10 say, I want to use my unique talents and gifts to honor God. I want to use my unique talents. I want to take who God built me to be to honor God. And I'm excited about the mission of the church in the world today. They see the church as integral, as so critical to the world and what the world needs from Christians. They want to contribute. Sometimes in the global culture we've made around church, we've actually made it more easy to consume the church than to contribute to the church. I know in my life, it's a lot easier for me to get on my computer and watch church and sing with my church leaders or with my community, for me to consume church no differently than I consume the news. It's easier to do that than it is to contribute to the church or contribute to my world. And as church leaders, I think we have to look at that and think, how many opportunities? And I think the work that Crew and so many of you do along the world gives them this opportunity to contribute and to give back. But we have to see that they have a big desire. They want to contribute to their world. But we should also be asking, well, what do they want to contribute to? What do we know about their generation in terms of the contribution they want to make? One way to think about this is that every generation, every individual person, you and you and you and you, all of us here has a purpose. But perhaps every generation has a purpose too. Maybe God didn't just design each individual in one way, but God also designed an entire generation to think a certain way, to see the world a certain way. When we study the globe of young people on both a local and global scale, next generations feel strongly about addressing injustices and caring for the marginalized. They feel it's their global purpose. But remember, but how? They're actually really unsure whose lead to trust or with who will follow them, who will help them in this purpose. All around the globe, you see it in the news every day. You see it on social media every day. Young people being so aware of the wrongs that are in the world. And it's not just to villainize the world or to say that the world's doing a bad job, but just to say we are so aware of how not everything is as it could be, that maybe the love of God hasn't been shown all around the world the way that it could. And so they feel as a generation, it's their responsibility to go make a difference. They have both a purpose as individuals and as a generation. So in the data, what you see is you ask them all around the globe, my generation has the ability to make a positive and meaningful impact on the world. And half of them say this. Half of them say, we can do this. We can go make a difference. It's especially true amongst teenagers, the 13 to 17-year-olds. 56% of them say this is, I agree strongly with this. We can make a difference. Sadly, it actually declines as they reach young adulthood. Maybe it's that they become more realistic or they become more jaded and sad about the world. But the fact is, still, over 1 out of 3 of them believe they can make a positive and meaningful impact. And this integrates with how they see their faith. When we ask young people, what is it that your faith inspires you to do? 77% of them say, well, it inspires me to give up my time to help others in need. Because of my faith, I want to give my resources to help others. I'm concerned about the welfare of others. I want to stand up against injustices that others are experiencing. I want to stand up against corruption. So often as church leaders, we get so concerned with giving them a true faith that we forget to give them a good faith, a faith that is good for the world, a faith that inspires them and equips them to go make a difference. They are really ready to do this. They want to go make that difference, and they see their faith as a reason to make a difference. All around the globe, this is US data because it's data we can show across generations. We see Gen Z is actually far more likely than all other generations to volunteer, to say, I'll give my personal time away for free to go make a difference. They want to. They see needs, they want to meet needs. And this should be encouraging. Sometimes it's easy to believe that it's because when you're young, when you're a teenager, you have more time, and it is the thing that you do to give time away because maybe you don't have money, you don't have resources when you're young. But it also reminds us that whether they continue volunteering or not, we have an opportunity at this young age range to give them formative experiences, to allow them to go experience the world and to do good and to learn from it. The problem that so many of us come up against is that they often don't see the church as a place to do this. All around the globe, what we asked young people was, how much of a role, if any, do you think each of the following should play in addressing injustices? So addressing the things that matter to you. And we asked them, does this thing, whether it's government, schools, politicians, does it play a major role? So they should be in charge, a minor role, they're involved, but maybe not leading, no role at all, or that they're not sure. And what we see is that Christian churches, Christian leaders, and even religious leaders come to the bottom of their list. They still see a role for the church. 44% of them say Christian churches and Christian leaders have a role to play, but it's at the bottom for them. They actually trust the church and religious leaders less when it comes to addressing injustices, when it comes to fulfilling the purposes that they've been called to do. And I think this should make us sad as church leaders that for some reason, they don't see us as a trustworthy place to fulfill their purposes, to fulfill the change they want to see in the world. So we asked them, well, what do you need? What do you need to go fulfill that purpose, to go address those injustices? What they tell us as individuals, so as individual people, they need their generation to step up as leaders, which means we have to teach them how to lead. We need to teach them what it looks like to lead. They need more people to care about the issues that they care about. They want to be seen. They want somebody to say, what you're passionate about matters. They need people to help them present steps for action. Just because they're excited, just because they're passionate, does not necessarily mean they know what to do. We can often offer them our leadership, offer them our skills in terms of how you lead, how you address change. And they also need encouragement. They need people cheering them on. We don't necessarily need to be the experts at what change they'd like to see in the world. We can actually help them with just our encouragement. When we ask them the same question, but about the church itself, what do you need the church to do? How can the church help you? What they tell us is that they need encouragement. They need us to encourage them, to cheer them on. They want us advocating. They want us teaching. These are things that the church all around the globe is actually really good at: encouragement, advocacy, teaching and education, creating relationships. The church can be the center of that. The church can be a place that helps them by just our encouragement, not by being the experts, not by being right or always knowing what to do, but just by coming alongside them, just by coming to them and saying, here's how we can help. We believe in you. We believe in your purpose, and we'd like to encourage you. So as Gen Z, next generations, grow into their own purposes, they will need models who can nurture their confidence and help them live out a Christian faith that is not just true, but is also good, good for others, good for the world. So as I conclude, I just want to remind us, this is what we've talked about today, that as leaders, we have an opportunity to embrace openness, offer belonging, and nurture purpose. I sincerely hope that this has been helpful to you as church leaders. I'm really excited to dig into a conversation with you all to hear more about what you're thinking. Thanks so much.
Wow, that was amazing. I'm so impressive. I think that we have a lot of information to work with. This was really, really, really good. So thank you so much, Danielle. I think that we have to take a while to process all the things that we receive. Um, but yeah, we have some short questions here, and I don't know if uh yeah, I would like to say to the participants, if you have some questions, more questions, just type on the chat, and I will read for Daniel here. Yeah, one first question that we received is that after this research, I know that you are presenting this content for churches, for other organizations. Um, the question is, what specific projects or activities have this organization or churches carried out working with Gen Z? Uh, there are some kind of example what the change that was carried out as a result of this research.
Yeah. So what practical things have people done because of this research?
Yeah.
Practically, what we've seen all around the globe, people, some very common things is that, for example, in Malaysia, we did some work with Malaysian leaders, and they started cohorts where they took young people and they took church leaders and they created dialogues on almost like small groups, but between intergenerational small groups where they could tackle big ideas and they could talk about the things that matter to young people and how older generations feel about these issues. And so imagine, so what they would do is, and we've seen this done in Malaysia and some parts of Europe, and I think some leaders in Canada did the same thing, is that they would take the data, the book or the presentation we just looked at, and they would put it in front of young people and say, hey, is this true of you? What would you say about this? And then if this is true of you, how do you want our ministry to change? What do you need in your life? And so they use the data to create, not just create conversation. Sometimes we look at resources like data and we think we need to come up with all of the changes. We think we have to come up with the new program or the new resource or the new approach. But the fact is,
We have
maybe
to
we can use
involve
this.
them.
Right. Invite them in. Let them look at the research. Let them look at the data and say, yeah, that's really true of me. I do feel lonely, or I do feel like I don't have a place where I can talk about my beliefs.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really interesting and a really insightful way that we don't have to have all of the answers. We can let them be involved in that. And so that's one of the best things I've seen done around the world. And it can be done in very traditional small group manners. just invite people together. Maybe it's every other week and say, hey, we're going to look at a few data points and we're going to talk about what does this mean to us, and let it be a conversation.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
did see in the chat if we can share the presentation slides. Yes, absolutely. We'll send all of it over to you guys. So happy for you to have that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it too helps a lot. And the follow question is that if you could use that presentation in our teams, like in our teammates, is okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a question about the old people. Like, one is how can we serve in practical ways to help build the bridges among generations? Like in some churches, we have young, but yeah, we have old people too. So how can we build these bridges between generations?
Yeah. One thing
And
we've seen.
related to
Yeah.
that, like I don't know if appears in the research some resistance among like Gen Z from old people. Like they have some resistance because one thing about our ministry is something that I'm experiencing right now. Like we as a staff, we are getting old, but the students and the college, they is still with the same age. They will be only always up among this 18 to 20 something. But the staff will getting old. Like so we have to be ready for that. Like, is there any resistance for the OD? How can we build these bridges?
So what I would say is, so in terms of how do we build bridges between our seniors and our minors, the youngest and the oldest, what I feel like, and what the data shows is around the globe, is that oftentimes we think programs can fix everything, that it's just a new program. And we get resistance to that because older people enjoy the church for what it has been their entire life. It provides a certain foundation for them. Um, they don't want things changed, whereas young people often demand change. And when we just play around with the format of church or the programming of what we're doing, oftentimes we can miss the mark in terms of what people are actually looking for. And what I would say is that one of the things that is so clear across the entire globe is everyone needs relationships. Everybody needs to know somebody's on their side. And that's true of older people and younger people. And so, what I would encourage you to do is don't overcomplicate it. Think just in terms of relationships. Can we have open places where older people are just put into relationship with younger people, just encouraged to talk about their jobs, talk about the life they've lived, talk about their family and kids in ways that don't need to be overcomplicated and sometimes even over spiritualized. Focus it on our commonalities rather than our differences and recognize that young people might need different things, and that's good. And we should pursue those things and we should empower them. At the same time, we should also, as a church body, cater to the needs of older people. And so maybe identify what are the common needs. And I would say one of the most common needs is relationship. Older people, empowering them to share with younger people and teaching younger people how to learn from older people, but also how to have their voices heard. Um, so often in American ministry, we do this all the time. We age, the term is age segregate. We say, well, this is young people's ministry and this is old people's ministry, and we don't put the two together. But I would tell you, for me as a millennial, my favorite ministries are when I'm with older people and I get to learn from them. And those are the things I want to go to, and those are the things that my friends want to go to because we want to learn from them. And so I think there's just identify that common need, the relationships, identify the things that both of them will enjoy, both of them will benefit from. And maybe the last thing I would say is don't be afraid of challenge. People will resist, and that's okay, but it's through the discomfort that we will all grow.
Mhm, mhm. Another question is about be open. Is how can we be open and avoid to fall in syncretism or this like mixture among beliefs, like because uh, how can you preserve our faith in a safe way,
Mhm.
being open? Yeah.
It's a great question. And it's hard to not answer that question without getting into some deep theology very quickly. And I would encourage you to think about the way that Christ, throughout the New Testament, critiques the Pharisees. Christ looks at the Pharisees and says, I know you've heard it one way, but I'm telling you there's a different way. I'm telling you that there's a bigger picture of the kingdom. And so often what Christ does in Christ's ministry is takes the things that people have been holding on to so tightly, so closed, the one way they know how to do church, and says, hey, you can open up a little bit, and there's a bigger and more beautiful version of the kingdom available to you. And so that doesn't mean we have to let go of the core beliefs that we have, our doctrine. That can just mean that we can open our hands to say there are more ways to experience Christ than I could ever imagine. The vision of the kingdom is bigger than I could ever imagine. And to value what a young person might be able to contribute to that kingdom. And to say there are very core doctrine we're not going to let go of, and that just because a young person needs to talk about that they might not believe in God, or they might not believe that Jesus was the Son of God, isn't a threat to us. I don't actually think that the church is under threat. We just need to open our hands a little bit and remember that Christ gave us permission to open up a little and to say, I know that you've experienced the world one way. The kingdom is bigger than that. And so I think it's a give and a take. Not to say that we are the Pharisees. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just
Mhm.
saying that Christ's ministry was all about expanding our vision of what the kingdom could be, expanding our understanding of how we love one another. Not, he never gave us a bullet pointed list of how we should be Christians. He actually complicated it with his own openness. And so I think we can have the same posture. The church isn't going away. The church isn't going to fade off into existence. It has an opportunity to say there's more ways to do church. There's more ways to be the kingdom than we could have ever imagined. And so sometimes that means letting go of things that we've held too tightly to. And that's okay. So that would be my answer. It's a hard question. It's really the right question because we can be so overwhelmed by all the ideas in the world today that we want to bunker down and we want to change nothing. But I don't know if we can meet young people if we're unwilling to hear them and to hear what they're struggling with, and let their struggles find a home in that kingdom.
Mhm. Yeah, another question is that we saw in the research that they are open to spirituality, but also in their early adulthood, the numbers of people who identify as having no faith has grown.
Mhm.
So it's possible to identify practical steps or practical topics to strengthen, to like to empower the follow up, the discipleship with Gen Z in
Yeah.
a way that they will not lose their faith when they reach the adulthood.
So I this is a wonderful question. How do we address dropout, specifically in the 18 to 22 or 18 to 24-year-old age range? And if I could give you one big headline, it would be this: don't be threatened by dropout. Um, Across all of modern history, people have dropped out of religion at that same age range, and they tend to come back later on. But it's the people who were poured the most into, the people with the best communities in their 13 to 18-year-old age ranges that come back later on. And so I think that's actually part of the openness we have to extend to them and offer them as a generation, to be non-anxious about their journey, to be non-anxious that they can go and have big questions. I can tell you from my own experience, I had a wonderful upbringing in the church. I loved my youth group. I loved the mission trips I went on. And as soon as I got to college here in America, I questioned everything I believed, because I was suddenly exposed to new thinking, to new people, to ideas I'd never considered before. And it took me years, many, many years, to find my way back to Christianity and back to Christ. But it was because of the experiences I had as a teenager that I felt like I could come back, and I felt like I wanted to come back. And so I would actually encourage you, don't be threatened by dropout. Your work to love on and care for young people extends beyond what they believe at one given moment. Uh, the resilience, the support you're pouring into them when they're 15 years old might come back. You can think of it similar to building up a toolbox, and building up tools to work with in life. And if I get really good with one tool, even if I don't use it for a few years, I can come back and use it later in life. And so I would worry less about that. Don't feel threatened. Feel encouraged that the 13 to 17-year-old age range, that young adult age range, is so critical for the things that we believe for the rest of our lives. So focus on the opportunity you have while you have them, and be non-anxious about what comes next for them. Equip them for the moment that they're in.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you. Um, yeah, I have a question. I don't know if I understand well, but yeah, is thinking about, I think that because it's in Portuguese, and for me it's really hard. I'm Brazilian. Thinking about how can we contribute to Gen Z? How can we nurture Gen Z's sense of belonging and authenticity when we share the truth of the gospel?
I would come back to remembering that they are um, they are part of the kingdom, whether no matter what. And that when we love on them and when we support them and we care for them right where they're at, when we're encouraging them to have belonging, I don't think that their belonging needs to be, they don't belong because of what they believe. They belong because Jesus picked them, and we get to love on them because Jesus picked them, no matter what they believe. And so when we extend that to them, when we extend that love to them, we are inviting them into the kingdom, and we're telling them that they belong. And so you can care for them, you can be with them and offer them community, and you can relieve yourself from the pressure of what do they believe right now? What are they going to be a few years from now? Focus on that one moment you have with them, and remind them that because Jesus loves them and because Jesus loves me, I'm going to extend love to you, and you will belong here no matter what. And over time, the same way that I really believe that God shapes us, kind of like how the ocean erodes a rock. It takes a long, long time. It's one wave at a time that changes a really coarse rock into something smooth. And just remember that your time with them is a part of that. And that you don't need to be anxious about the next wave. You just get to be present with them in one moment.
Mhm. Another question is something that, yeah, I will read. Something that I perceive is that this generation is a little more sensitive than the previous one. How can we grow in understanding them, but also how can we tell them at some point that it's good for them, but sometime, let me see, they say something to them in a way that is not appropriate for them.
Mm.
I don't know if I understand. I think that the question is related with it's a how can we improve the communication? Like, how can we, yeah, they that is a perception. Like we
Yeah.
the perception is that they are more sensitive than the previous one. Yeah, we understand, but and from then, how can we communicate in appropriate way?
So I think I have two thoughts for this. First, this generation, next generations are so overwhelmed by the world. They have more pressure, more stimulus than any generation previous. The amount of information, the amount of people that are available to them is just overwhelming. This is the trajectory the world is on, really overwhelming. So much information. Um, as an example, if you all remember, last year there were terrible earthquakes that killed thousands of people in Turkey. And I was really distraught by this. It was so sad, broke my heart. And I thought a lot about how 30 years ago, 50 years ago, I wouldn't have known that happened. Or maybe it would have been weeks or months until I found out that that happened. But right now, people know instantly that it happened. And that's so overwhelming. That's so much information. That's so much heartbreak. And at any moment, you might get that news that it's happening somewhere else in the world. And so we have to be incredibly humble and sensitive to their sensitivity, to recognize that there's never been a generation that is more overwhelmed by the amount of information in the world, the amount of ideas in the world. And I think we ourselves maybe actually can work harder to be almost more overwhelmed and to recognize how hard it is to live at the time that we live in. Uh, so I would say first, just acknowledge that with them. Acknowledge that it's really hard, that we've never lived at a time of history like this. It's unprecedented, and that the amount of information, the amount is so overwhelming. The second thing I would say is to be curious about them, curious about their experiences, which is actually, as a researcher, my disposition towards the world, the way I see the world is I try to be very curious about it. Ask why far more than we explain for people. Ask why they're experiencing things. Ask why, because the fact is, if they're sensitive to things, if they're overwhelmed, they might not know why. And sometimes we assume they do. Sometimes we assume they know and understand their experiences far better than they actually do. And so maybe take that sensitivity you're sensing, and rather than creating an opinion of it, rather than being having any sort of judgment for it, just be curious about them. Ask them why they feel that way. Ask them what would make them feel better. What do they need right now? It might not actually matter how true or how false that feeling is. Just be curious. Be curious towards them. Ask them why. Ask them more questions. Ask them at least 3 more questions than you usually would. Just keep asking why, and they'll share with you and allow them to encourage that openness. And I think by doing that, you'll form a more bonded relationship that will then bear greater fruit later on.
Mhm. Yeah, just one more question. It's this question, and then we go to finish. I meet a lot of Gen Z students who are new believers and like crew, but are skeptical about going to church. How can we encourage them to be involved in a local church?
Yeah, great question. And so thrilled to hear that you meet a lot of new Gen Z students who are those new believers and are enjoying crew. That's wonderful and encouraging to hear. A few things. First, um, I think a lot of church leaders around the world today make the assumption that all teenagers and all young people really understand the church and what the church is. What the data actually show around the globe is that young people understand Christ fairly well. They understand the Bible okay, not great. They don't really understand the church. This is a might feel like a silly statistic for you, but in the first global study we were a part of, we found that 50% of young Christians did not could not tell us the denomination they were a part of. They didn't know the denomination of their church. And that represents a misunderstanding of the church. People, they don't understand it as well as maybe past generations have. And so when you encourage them to be a part of a church, maybe take time to explain to them what church really is, and what it's not. We have a lot of um, myths in the world right now about what the church is. And so I myself, I'm a part of a very liturgical church where we do a lot of readings together. And I really enjoy those because I feel like they connect me to church history. It makes me feel like I'm part of something that's been going on for thousands of years. And I find that really beautiful. But it took somebody teaching me those things. It took somebody teaching me why we do that, to make me more interested in church. And so maybe do more investigation. Why are you skeptical of a local church? And then maybe just take some time to coach them into what church really is and what it's not, that you're not, it's not a new subscription program. You're not signing up for something, that it's a community of people who want to love themselves and love Jesus deeper. And so maybe demystify it for them, explain why we gather the way that we do, help them understand what they're looking at and what it is. And by the same time, you'll do help them understand what it's not. And then the last thing I would say is just come back to thinking about what are their core needs. Their core needs is to feel loved, to feel like they belong, and help them even understand if a church might not be the right church for them. I don't know as much about your settings where you are around the globe, but where I live in the United States, if in if I was to go for a 20-minute drive in a big circle, I'd probably see 20 different churches. There are so many churches, and they all are very different than each other. And so maybe just help a young person find the kind of congregation that they would really fit in and really belong in. Be their coach, more than you are being their boss or their manager. Just help them find their belonging, bring it back to that those deep needs that they feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Something that we will challenge the participants of this program is to develop and implement some project to connect with Gen Z, in like it could be in person on the field in the campus, in a college campus, or it can be through digital strategies. Something that I would like to ask you, like, what kind of maybe broad advice could you give them uh, in a way that it could help them with this project, like beyond what you have done so far, like
Yeah.
the whole presentation? But if you could be specifically about um, like, yeah, these ideas to foster projects to engage and to connect these young people with Christ. What it could be?
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer it this way. If I was to start a program that was going to reach young people today, recognizing that where I live in the world is different than where you live in the world, I would really focus on those relational needs that they have. Um, I find that a lot of young people in my life, my own age or younger, they don't have places that they feel like they belong or that they can be themselves. And so I would focus on building some sort of program, building some sort of communal place that they can come and maybe just engage in ideas, read a book together. It can feel very simple, but I think that there's something really beautiful to just, and this is where I can't speak to the global nature because I don't know all of your settings, but there are so few places in my world today where I can just go engage with people, go talk to people, have deep conversation with them. And so I would focus on relationships, relationship building. I would also focus, this is something we have not talked today about, but I would focus a lot on the physical place that you are in, finding beauty in a place, because in our really digital world, we spend a lot of times isolated to our screens, a lot of time isolated to just connecting like this. When I get off this webinar with you all today, I will keep sitting in this room for probably the next 6 or 7 hours working and having other meetings with other people. And then when I finish, I'm going to go home, and tomorrow I'll do it all over again today. No one else sits in this room other than me.
Wow.
And that means that on a daily basis, I'm not connecting with many people, but I'm also experiencing the world through something, this big or just
Through a
this
screen.
big.
Yeah.
And so um, we did this project a year or so ago at Barna where we invited atheists to visit churches with us. And we were actually really astounded and encouraged by how beautiful atheists thought churches were. They looked at our churches and they said, wow, this is a really peaceful place. I don't go very many places in my week that I think are beautiful because I spend most of my time connecting with people digitally. And so I would focus on relationships. I would focus on a physical place that people can gather and create meaning in, a place that they can feel attached to, whether that's a park, whether that's a church, whether that's, I would love if it was somewhere outside personally. But think very intentionally about where you're gathering, and then focus on, I would be focusing on, this is maybe the hardest one of all, and don't make it too comfortable. People are we make everything in the world today to be convenient and to be comfortable. And so I don't think you could do it up front. I don't think you could do it in a first meeting, but it's okay for people to disagree with each other. It's okay with people to have different opinions. And maybe I would make my programming about disagreement. Rather than, this is a place where everybody believes the same thing, everybody thinks the same way, I would actually build something that encourages people to disagree and to find their commonality rather than just assuming we all believe the same stuff. And so maybe that would be in the United States, as you might know, we have a huge political debate going on. Our politics are very extreme at the moment, and it's very sad. But when people get together and they disagree with each other and they have hard conversations, they come out better on the other side when we coach and facilitate those things. So I would focus on relationships. I would focus on the place we're meeting and making it a safe place, but also making it a place that doesn't look like the rest of the things that we're experiencing, not so digital, in person. And then I would work hard to make sure that we are addressing things that might be uncomfortable, that we're actually building through discomfort. We don't grow as people through comfort. We learn through adversity. We learn through disagreeing. And so I would say, don't just cater to what everybody wants. And then maybe the last thing that I would say is I wouldn't worry so much about how big it is. I'd worry about how deep it is. I would rather, personally in my own life, I would be much more rather likely to go spend every Tuesday night with 6 people who are really invested and really close to each other than an event with 100 people where I can't get to know anybody. And I don't know about your settings, but here in the States, church leaders often believe that big is better than deep. And that's sad. And it's sad for young people who need deep and meaningful things in their life. So relationships, physical places, beautiful places. It's okay if it's uncomfortable, and it's better to go deep than to be big. There's too many big and not so meaningful things in our world. That's what I would focus on. That's a lot of things. I don't know how practical they are in your place, but that's what I would focus on.
Yeah, just one question. If I don't
Yeah,
make this question, they will cut off my head. Like, I'm thinking on not only Gen Z that we want to reach, but the Christian Gen Z, we also want to develop as leaders. I think that I told you, we are student-led movement, like
right.
students are leading our movement. I wonder how can we also take advantage of the opportunity we have to mobilize them? What would you say we could to do to develop young people as leaders to impact their other young people? So it's how can we develop young people as leaders?
So I think the number one thing here is to trust them. To trust them to, I think as leaders, we often think we have to have the right answers and that we often think we have to run perfect programs. Um, what I think, and we're so as a young person, and what we see in the data is that young people are so afraid to fail, so afraid to fail that we're often not willing to try. We're often not willing to risk failure. And so we encourage church leaders to say, hey, your church, your student-led ministry might be the only place in a young person's life where they can fail and still be loved. And so give them opportunities, trust them. Some research here that I've seen before says that trust is far more valuable than performance. We expect people to perform at really high levels to meet all their goals, but it's actually more important as leaders that we trust the people that we're leading than that we demand high things out of them. So I would say trust them, give them a little bit more leadership than maybe you're comfortable with, and recognize that this might be the safest environment for them to fail in, and that they can then learn through that failure. And learning through that failure will be more of a lesson to them than never getting the chance to fail in the first place. So give them that chance, trust them more than you're comfortable with, and recognize that that will then lead into them impacting other students. Because when we feel trusted, we tell others. It means so much to us. I think that's my biggest encouragement. Trust them more than you're comfortable with. Give them that opportunity, even if it means failure.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was amazing, amazing. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for your time. Yeah, I think that we've reached our time is gone. But I'm really impressed about how uh rich was this conversation with you. And I know that if we have time, we will spend the whole day talking and thinking about things that we are doing. But yeah, we have a lot of things to process and to apply in our follow up. So I would like to say thank you for you,
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, thank you
Thank you so much, Fernando. Thank you all so much for your amazing questions and for taking the time. Fernando, if you don't mind, before we log off, could I pray for you all?
for sure.
I'd love that. God of the great and beautiful universe, thank you for the opportunity via technology to connect so many wonderful, beautiful creations of yours, these people who are passionate about your kingdom, who are compassionate towards the next generation, and want to learn more about how they can care for your people, for your planet, for your world. I am feel so connected to you, God, when I see the good work that is going on all around the world. And I'm so thankful for the lives of these people. I pray that you encourage them when they need encouragement, that you lead them when they need leading, and that you trust them to do the work that you have called them to do, and that they trust and lean on you as they go. You are a good and beautiful God, And we're so thankful for the things that you're doing in the world today. And we are so honored that you want to work with us, that you want to work through us as a global body. We pray that as we depart this Zoom call, we feel encouraged and more connected to you and to your people. I pray for the safety, the well-being, physically and mentally, of every single life here and every life that this Zoom call represents. This Zoom call doesn't represent just 60-something